All right, guys, welcome to standard versus competency-based grading. I'm Eden, and my partner is Megan. So, what is competency-based grading? We have a little video here. Now, everyone loves videos, and he draws. So, let's go ahead and watch this really quick.
Hello, I'm Mr. Friesmeyer. I'm an 8th grade social studies teacher at Harlem Middle School, and this is how we do standards-based reporting. So 8 times a year in the mailbox, you receive your standards-based report. It is absolutely important you understand what this means and how it provides you feedback for your learning. When that report arrives and you open it up, it just has a whole lot of confusing numbers on it. What do I do with these numbers? First, you need to understand what these numbers mean. 1 means below, little to no understanding of grade level standard. 2 is approaching, inconsistent or partial performance on that grade level. And 3 means it meets and consistently performs at that grade level. 4 is an indication that the student is showing above grade level skills. This can be extremely overwhelming. You may even ask questions, why don't we just use A, B, C, D, F? It's okay to be uncomfortable with this. With the A, B, C, D, F scale, all skills were grouped into 1 grade. A student knew 90% but was missing 10% of something. So with 1, 2, 3, 4, we can indicate what skill they are lacking in and challenge or help them with that missing skill. When you read this report, you'll see the social studies standards and the work habits. Work habits include being prepared for class, doing your work at a high quality level, and participating and staying engaged in classroom. These are the process skills. These are important for all, regardless of skill level. Having 3s here would be ideal, showing you're doing your job. The social studies standards then are broken down into skills. You need to look at the numbers of these skills. If a student has a 3, they're there right now. If they have a 2 or 1, they're not there yet. So what now? Well, there's things a student can do using these numbers. 1, fix the work habits that are not 3s. Meet with a teacher, get feedback, practice more, retake any assessments, and then repeat this process. Remember, I can't do it is not the same as I didn't do it.
All right, so just a quick little introduction to what we're going to be talking about. So we noticed that there were a few similarities and differences between traditional and competency-based. So what does that mean for us as teachers here in Iowa? So teachers report what students know relative to Iowa core. So a lot of times our school districts will decide for us what kind of grading system we're going to have. So traditional would be the A, B, C, D, E, or A, B, C, D, F. But like the video said, the competency based is 1, 2, 3, 4. So the principles behind the competency-based grading, as you can see, say student advancement upon mastery. So you don't get to move on to the next level until you complete the level right before that. There's explicit and measurable learning objectives. So it's very targeted, very, very clear what the expectation is. Assessment is meaningful and positive experience for students. A lot of times, I know, especially like coming from my own experience where assessment is something I'm like, why do we need to know this? And you don't actually feel positive about it. And so it kind of just makes you not want to try or actually not want to do it, period. So rapid and differentiated support for all students. That just means we're getting after it quickly. We're identifying students who need different kind of scaffolding and being able to target their learning capabilities and their learning needs. And then learning outcomes emphasize application and creation of knowledge. So this is like the last kind of final step where they're taking the information that they just got and they're processing it and are able to use it outside of just the classroom work. So they're taking it away from that paper that they wrote or the worksheet they filled out, and they're actually able to go out in real life and be able to use the skills that they learned. So what is the purpose of using competency-based grading? So it helps to improve student achievement of the standards required in Iowa. And actually, the Iowa State the core standards are very similar to the National Common Core standards. I think there's a few things that are different with like social studies and stuff where you have to learn about Iowa history, and some in science where you have to learn about different things here in Iowa. But all in all, it's like the same. So it also gives students the opportunity to master the learning targets instead of focusing on getting a certain amount of points. So I know, myself included, um, making sure that we have enough points to get that passing grade to get, I mean, wherever you are in life, if you're trying to get that C or if you're trying to get that A, um, getting a certain amount of points is always been something that I have had to worry about. But with competency based grading, it's more about making sure that you understand the material rather than you're just completing things for points. Hopefully that makes sense. It encourages students to be reflective and responsible learners. Um, so being able to self-reflect and be aware of how you're thinking about things is a major point of learning. Um, when students become responsible for their own learning, they're able to really go back and like be able to think about, well, what more could I have done if they don't quite understand this. Right now in my reading practicum, my CT gives out um, a rubric every week for reading. It's a reading rubric that they have to go through, and it has different skills on it, like fluency, spelling, and the theme of the week. So they have to go through, and they have things that they can do. Doesn't have to be like in a certain order. They can skip around from skill to skill or from activity to activity as they please. But by the end of the week on Fridays is when we test. And once they get their test scores, they're supposed to bring up that rubric, any worksheets that they had to fill out that week, and their laptop because it's a one-on-one. So the teacher gets to see all of their iExcel scores, any scores from their spelling website that they use, and they see the test score for that week. And they're able to go back and actually identify, well, if this student just tested bad on this day, but the rest of the week they understood this concept, then they're actually at a 3. Or maybe they are at a 2, whereas a student who maybe happened to guess a bunch of the right answers um, maybe showed weaknesses throughout the week. And that's when we would give them like a 2. So that's something to think about. And that also puts the learning responsibility on the students. Yes, as teachers, we're giving them tools along the way, like doing small groups and doing really short whole group activities. But when we hand over the learning responsibility to students, they take ownership of it, and they know that at the end of the week, they're supposed to know these concepts. And if they don't, then us as teachers are there for scaffolding. And then competency-based grading aims to give students a more personalized approach to learning. So again, like students get to pick and choose what they're doing and when. They're able to do things in a way that works for them. So that really helps students individualize and to personalize their learning experience. So the picture on the right got off of Google. Thank God for Google. So it kind of takes you through the steps of competency-based grading, which is kind of what I explained with my reading practicum. So you learn a new skill, you practice a skill, you make mistakes, you analyze and fix mistakes, quiz on the skill. That's like learning the new skill would be Monday, practice the skills Tuesday, Wednesday you're making the mistakes, Thursday you're analyzing and fixing, and then the quiz is on Friday. And then based on the quiz, you move on to the next concept, or are you still making the mistakes, which is in the yellow, which is when you would ask for help. And that's when the teacher would then individualize the rubric for next week for that student and make sure that maybe they didn't do so hot on understanding the main idea or understanding that the theme of the week was main idea. So some of those activities from the previous week get altered and put back onto the rubric for the following week. just so they really can get back to the green of demonstrating mastery. This is just another picture I found, all about visuals. Love seeing pictures. Um, so there's a lot going on here. We can see that blended learning is a big thing. One-to-one is huge here in Iowa. You almost have to have one-on-one nowadays. Um, but not only are they in a classroom with a teacher, with their peers, but they have the technology at their fingertips to be able to do a lot of the things that like we weren't able to do when we were in elementary school. Um, and underneath the blended learning, it says students work through curriculum at their own pace. Yes, to a certain extent, they get to work at their own pace, but there's still kind of a pace that needs to be followed where by this time in the year, this is where they should be at. Um, but again, when students take responsibility for their learning, it's more likely that they will take care of it themselves. Um, what else did I want to point out on here? Um, I think that's it. We can just mosey on this for a little bit longer, but um, yeah, as we can see, competency based grading and traditional grading are just a little bit different. Here's a few key points about how they are. So, while competency based, like we had talked about, works because students work at their own pace, whereas traditional, it's more scripted where all students start and end classes at the same time. While there are some subjects or topics that's necessary for competency based learning, doesn't focus on that. Um, and then the next bullet point: when students demonstrate a competent score, they pass the class, um, and that is also done on an individual basis. Um, and that's something that some students have to work for multiple times, and so it might seem like students are getting redo after redo, um, but before they can retest, they're able to work on those skills, or they're supposed to be able to work on those skills before they're able to reassess. My sister is in seventh grade, and she is on competency based grading. And what happens when she ends up getting a 2 or a 3 on something is her teachers give her like a week's worth of material that she has to complete, and she has to be able to pass that stuff. And the teachers will check every day: did you complete this? um, what was the completion rate, or how many did you get right or wrong? And then they kind of go from there as to, okay, is she ready to retest? They won't let her retest unless they feel like she will be able to get that 3 or 4. Um, but as traditional, we all know that C is still passing. I mean, we've all heard the saying, C's get degrees, right? But with competency based learning, that's not the case. You have to know what's going on. You have to fill in those gaps of your understanding to be able to move on. And then students have the option to take one class at a time or multiple classes. This is this goes along with the students work at their own pace, so they can choose to take one class or do multiple classes, kind of like we get to do in college, where we can do one class a semester, we can do up to an overload, right? So that's not a new concept for us. And then traditional is the only option for students who get failing grades is to retake the class, which I feel like we've all experienced with the pass fail kind of courses, or even here in the College of Ed, we have the uh, where we have to get the 80% or higher to pass the class. Um, and then learning is student centered. It's all about getting the kids to understand more of the content and getting them more involved in the topics and in the learning. And a lot of times that gets them into knowing how they learn best and actually teaching themselves. Um, but the traditional grading is seen as discouraging, and many kids end up giving up trying in the traditional grading system versus the competency based. So some of the advantages and disadvantages again. Um, so advantages of the competency based on the left here. Learning targets are clearly communicated so students know what they're expected to learn. This is what I mentioned earlier, where it's very explicit, very clear. Students know what is expected of them. Parents are more easily able to see what their child needs more help with so that they can work on it at home. Because learning targets are so specific and explicit, this makes it easier for parents to become involved. And what we've learned throughout the college of ed is that when parents get involved, that students are more likely to succeed. They see that care and that respect for learning through their parents. And in doing that, they're more likely to take pride and responsibility in their learning. Um, Also, having the traditional grading, there's not usually specific feedback. Learning goals weren't as clear, and it was more of like they were more like themes rather than okay, we have math and we have to cover multiplication and division. Well, multiplication, there's single digit, double digit, triple digit, whatever you want to say. Um, and that would be traditional, and that's all you would get. But with competency based grading, it'd be like, okay, multiplication of single digits, and then single digits, um, and how they lead into double digits, and having like those micro managing tools within there. Um, it's just more communication, more clear, so that parents are able to understand as well. And then let students take more control of their learning. Been talking this whole presentation about how awesome that is and how much students respond to that. Some of the disadvantages are that it is a lot different from standard based grading. Um, Change takes time for people to adapt to. A lot of people don't want to see that competency based grading is a good thing just because everyone's used to the traditional um, way of grading, which is fine. That's how we've all kind of been taught up until this point. Um, but I think once we start seeing change in understanding and communication through this, that more people will end up opening up to it and accepting it. So then we have teachers, students, and all community members will be affected by the change. Just having more comprehension about what's going on and having more understanding of real life concepts will help, I think, everyone tremendously. Similarities and differences. In both traditional and standard based grading, students are learning specific standards based on predetermined topics. So again, like I talked about, where you have to learn math, and in math there's multiplication and division. Um, so those are some predetermined topics. Students take ownership for their learning, include some kind of formative assessment throughout the learning. So that way we're just making sure that students don't need to go and take a step back before they can move forward. Um, Sometimes that happens, and sometimes as teachers, we think things are going super well, and then once we get to that formative assessment, we're like, oh man, now we have to take five steps back in order to take 3 steps forward again. Um, so we got to make sure to have that formative assessment. So differences: competency-based grading is more accurately represents the learning progress of students. Sorry, I butchered that. Um, yeah, because everything is so specific, so explicit, um, it's easier to pinpoint and see where a student needs help. In competency-based grading, subjects are all divided into big ideas and learning targets that are clearly communicated to the students. Again, more communication, more clarity, better understanding. The emphasis in competency-based grading is on positive and consistent work habits instead of getting a certain amount of points. So this goes along with students taking responsibility for their learning. They end up learning how they learn best and what they need to do to be able to accomplish the things that they need to do. So these are just some basic tenets about comprehension-based grading. So the assessment, it's competency based. Um, grade reporting, uh, again, we're looking for scores that reflect their individual level of mastery. It's all very student specific. Classroom instruction, they all have unique learning plans. So, like the rubrics that I talked about, where some students are at different points than others, so they have um, an edited, I guess, rubric that's specific for them. And then pacing, students move on when they master skills, but have supports in place to keep them on track. So again, like back to the rubrics, students have to be able to show that they understand a topic or have to provide evidence as to why they do or why they don't. And if they can move on or if they need another week or so to really grasp that concept. Um, but the supports that a lot of teachers end up giving are worksheets, more hands-on practices, just things that get students more involved, I guess, in their learning. So these are discussion questions. Our first one is, do you think competency-based grading or traditional grading should be used more often, and why? Have you had any experiences with competency-based grading, and if so, what were they? How would teachers have to adapt their procedures if we switch to just competency-based grading? Also, along with this last one, do you think that teachers already have? Do you think that the newer teachers, I guess, that are out there, do you think that they already kind of have procedures in place for competency-based grading? If so, let's hear your experiences, because I know from my own, a lot of the grading that gets done is competency-based grading. So just like to hear from some of you guys about that. And our references, a lot of the pictures. Okay, thanks, guys.